डू यू थिंक जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं पीपल हु आर लर्निंग उनके लिए मटेरियल एजुकेशन कितना इंपॉर्टेंट होता है?
ये जो स्टूडेंट्स अब आर्किटेक्चर कर रहे हैं, पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं, तो उनको भी काफ़ी नॉलेज होनी चाहिए, उनको एक्सपोजर होना चाहिए, मटेरियल सिलेक्शन आना चाहिए, क्या मटेरियल उनको आई थिंक मतलब काफ़ी हेल्प करेगा। एक्चुअली वी स्टार्टेड ड्यूरिंग कोविड, सो इट रियली हेल्प अस। लोग फ्लैट से अपार्टमेंट, स्मॉल हाउसेस से थोड़े बिग न्यू अपार्टमेंट में शिफ्ट हो रहे थे, लाइक बिग रेजिडेंशियल प्रोजेक्ट। हमने एक अच्छा प्रोजेक्ट डिलीवर करा, तो उसके अलावा फिर माउथ पब्लिसिटी से हमें काफ़ी प्रोजेक्ट्स मिलने लगे।
So I'll tell you what happens is, as architects, when the client hires us, they trust us with the whole spatial process because that is the expertise that we can bring in, right?
No perfect stories, nothing flashy, but this just started as a help, turned into a collaboration, and now 5 years into the business. Today we have Saumya Khanna and Sudhir Ambawata from Studio SSDA. Hi Saumya, hi Sudhir, how are you?
Hi Komal, thanks for having
हाय
me.
कोमल।
Just tell me something about SSDA and the story behind it.
So SSDA is we're an architecture interior design studio. We're based out of Delhi, but we are lucky that we are working all across India. We're fortunate for that. We are a young firm. We started about half a decade ago, and we enjoy uh, the work that we do here.
Sudhir, we started in the COVID era, probably just after that. Uh, People were full of emotions. They realized the importance of a home. How do you think this has shaped you as an architect?
Actually, we started mostly during COVID, so it really helped us कि like लोग फ्लैट से अपार्टमेंट, स्मॉल हाउसेस से थोड़े बिग न्यू अपार्टमेंट में शिफ्ट हो रहे थे, लाइक बिग रेजिडेंशियल प्रोजेक्ट्स। सो काफ़ी फार्म हाउस प्रोजेक्ट्स भी हमारे पास उसी रिगार्डिंग वी स्टार्टेड। तो लोग लाइक सिटी, लाइक छोटे, लाइक 200 गज, 300 गज, 500 गज से मूव होकर फार्म हाउस, लाइक हाफ एन एकड़, 1 एकड़, लाइक मोर देन 20,000 स्क्वायर फीट। तो उस समय कोविड के टाइम लोगों ने थोड़ा इमोशनल थे कि लोग खर्च करने लगे थे, लाइक उनको न्यू प्रॉपर्टी लेनी थी। पहले लोग जॉइंट फैमिली में रह रहे थे, तो डिफरेंट डिफरेंट मतलब लोग सबने 3 फार्म हाउस ले लिए, लोगों ने अलग-अलग घर में। तो उससे हमें काफ़ी बेनिफिट मिला, तो एकदम से हमने जो पीक करा था, तो हमने एक अच्छा प्रोजेक्ट डिलीवर करा। तो उसके अलावा फिर माउथ पब्लिसिटी से हमें काफ़ी प्रोजेक्ट्स मिलने लगे। फिर उसके बाद मतलब उससे पहले हम आई थिंक कोविड के टाइम लोग मतलब घर बैठ के सोशल मीडिया वगैरह काफ़ी एक्टिव थे। बट उस समय हमने सिर्फ अपने काम पे ध्यान दिया, सोशल मीडिया पे कोई ध्यान नहीं देता। आफ्टर मतलब आई थिंक अराउंड 2 इयर्स या 1 इयर्स, अराउंड 1 एंड हाफ इयर्स वी स्टार्टेड विद अवर सोशल मीडिया, इंस्टाग्राम, फेसबुक, लिंक्डइन। सो उससे हमें काफ़ी हेल्प मिली आफ्टर कोविड। एंड इमोशनली लोग अपने घर से काफ़ी जुड़े होते हैं कि लाइक मेरे को अपना घर इस टाइप से बनाना है, अच्छा बनाना है। आजकल लोग काफ़ी एंथुसिज्म होते हैं कि घर को लेके कि लाइक दे स्पेंड टू मच ऑफ मनी एंड ऑल एवरीथिंग। सो इट रियली हेल्प अस टू ग्रो। हाँ, ऐसा।
Speaking of just before this podcast, I think Soumya, you and me were speaking of the first project you did, the residential project. I would want to know the story so that you can tell our audience that how did it start?
So it's actually a fun story. Sudhir and I, we met at a firm where we were working together. And right after, about COVID, like in mid of COVID, I was like, bro, like I don't want to work. I don't want to do this, the kind of project I was doing there, that particular project. And I was like, let me try and explore. Let me try and go for my master's, or let me figure out what I want to do with my life. While I was sitting back, fortunately, a friend of a friend reached out, and then they're like, "Chota project hai, dining drawing room hai, and a small basement in their house." They're like, "Would you want to pick it up?" I was like, "Sure, I'm preparing for my masters. I'll do that, and I can do this parallelly. It's not a problem." Design ho gaya, everything was sorted, everything got approved, and I was like, "Okay, but they're like, who's going to execute this?" I was like, "Okay, I have a friend, I have a pal." I reached out to Sudhir. I was like, "Sudhir, are you interested? Will you please help me construct this thing?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. But like in return, I have a project. Why don't you help me design that? Like let's design it together because it was the first big project. This was in a little over half an acre. And this was a residential project. And for somebody who is, like maybe 3-4 years into the profession, they're like, okay, I could use a helping hand. And we actually collaborated on these two projects. And the fun story about that project was also the client was a builder who was doing his first builder project. Sudhir and I, first time architects doing our first individual big projects. And the client was like, okay, why don't let me just consult a Vastu person. And the Vastu person sees this plot and he sees the designing and he's like, what mess have you gotten yourself into? Ye project to nahi bik raha.
Is it?
Yeah. Literally 2 months, foundation was laid for that project and that project got sold. And today it's been over 4 years. The client is staying there happily, no complaints. And from that project, we got so many more projects.
Wonderful. Sudhir, speaking of your background, because your father was a contractor, आपने वो देखा है, आपकी upbringing उसी तरीके से की गई है. आपको मटेरियल्स के बारे में पहले से पता होगा. बट डू यू थिंक जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं, यू नो पीपल हु आर लर्निंग, उनके लिए मटेरियल एजुकेशन कितना इम्पोर्टेंट होता है?
इसमें काफ़ी हेल्प करता है लाइक इफ़ वी हैव अ फर्म सो हर एक दिन न्यू मटेरियल आ रहा है, क्या मटेरियल है, क्या है वुड है, क्या वीनियर है, लोग लैमिनेट्स को वीनियर बोलते हैं, वीनियर को लैमिनेट बोलते हैं, क्या पेंट होना चाहिए, किस पे क्या फिनिश होनी चाहिए, मार्बल कैसा है, टाइल क्या है, तो वो लाइक काफ़ी फ़र्क पड़ता है कि विद टाइम मैंने भी काफ़ी मतलब लर्न कर रहे हैं, अभी तक भी हम नए नए एक्सपेरिमेंट करते रहते हैं, मटेरियल देखते हैं, नए मार्केट में इतनी सब चीज़ें आ गई है. बट हाँ, ड्यूरिंग कॉलेजेस ये जो स्टूडेंट्स अब आर्किटेक्चर कर रहे हैं, पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं, तो उनको भी काफ़ी नॉलेज होनी चाहिए, उनको एक्सपोजर होना चाहिए, मटेरियल सिलेक्शन आना चाहिए, क्या मटेरियल है उनको आई थिंक मतलब काफ़ी हेल्प करेगा कि डिफरेंट मटेरियल, डिफरेंट फिनिश क्या लग्जरी में यूज़ कर सकते हैं हम, किस में बजट में प्रोजेक्ट क्या मटेरियल यूज़ करना है, तो काफ़ी हेल्प होती है. आई थिंक वो कॉलेजेस को भी थोड़ा सा अपनी मतलब द पार्ट ऑफ एजुकेशन बनाना चाहिए कि मटेरियल सिलेक्शन एक पूरा प्रोजेक्ट प्रोजेक्ट होना चाहिए, जिस तरह से भी हेल्प कर सकते हैं तो होना चाहिए.
Sana, lately I have been observing that everybody has been focusing on decor and detailings. You know, everything has become about furniture or furnishings. Bed sheet कैसी है, और you know घर के पर्दे कैसे हैं, how is the paint like, what is the marble like. But do you think that actually special designing, you know, that is the most important part?
Special as in like spatial.
Yes, it is basics.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what happens is, as architects, when the client hires us, they they trust us with the whole spatial process because that is the expertise that we can bring in, right? Like we do bubble diagrams, we do what space needs to be connected to what, and that is something that is permanent. So how the light is coming in, how big is the window, how are you, making the space a little more sustainable. AC usage आपका कैसे कम हो सकता है? So that is why SSDA plays a lot of importance to this spatial planning of the house. जो decor elements है क्या होता है? People are focusing on it because at a very layman level, people are able to associate with it. So that is what people like, especially on Instagram, especially on these social media. This thing people are trying to advertise that more because उनको लगता है इससे मेरे पास maybe the clients are going to get drawn to this. This is going to get me more likes. That's why people are pushing that forward on social media. However, somebody who's a true architect or a true designer will naturally correct things at ground zero, which is the spatial plan.
But you didn't answer my question. How do you think spaces are important? You know, why don't you think that rather than focusing on likes, people should be focusing on spaces and putting it out, that this is how a space should be built? What is your take on that? Because you're very active on social media.
Yeah. No, of course we actually do try to focus on, maybe it is maybe certain areas it does get missed because there's a lot of content that is available on social media in today's time. So how and where you are placing certain things, like for example, if you're putting your how the kind of window the kitchen has, so the spaces, like as a how the person needs to feel in a family lounge. Like for example, it is giving you that comfort wala feeling, or it is giving you that feeling, okay, I can be myself, I can lounge around. So how you design that area, not in terms of just the materials and textures, but in terms of the location of the thing, how big the window is. Do you get enough light that you would want to spend your day there? So those things become of key importance.
Speaking of your projects, SSDA's project, Sudhir, I think aesthetic minimalism, luxury is the word. But how do you associate with your project? What is the process of designing जो SSDA का है?
इसमें इनिशियली वी गेट डिज़ाइन ब्रीफ लाइक रिक्वायरमेंट्स, क्लाइंट की लाइफस्टाइल, वो काफ़ी डिपेंड करते हैं, क्लाइंट्स का बजट, तो उसके रिगार्डिंग फिर वी स्टार्ट डिज़ाइनिंग लाइक देयर इज मूड बोर्ड प्रेजेंटेशंस लाइक काफ़ी चीज़ें, मतलब उसमें क्लाइंट का एक लाइफस्टाइल का पार्ट, बजट एंड मूड बोर्ड्स, मतलब काफ़ी चीज़ें होती है आजकल. लाइक सोशल मीडिया पे सब लोग इतने एक्टिव है, तो उन लोगों को भी काफ़ी क्लियर होता है कि यार मेरे को इस डिज़ाइन लैंग्वेज को फॉलो करना है, मेरे को किस क्लासिकल करना है, नियो क्लासिकल करना है, थोड़ा मैक्सिमलिस्ट करना है। तो उससे ईज़ी हमारे लिए भी एक हेल्प मिल जाती है, और कहीं न कहीं हमारे लिए लेटेस्ट कन्फ्यूजन भी होती है कि लोग फिर अपने आइडियाज़ भी बीच-बीच में डालते रहते हैं। लाइक जो हमारे एक डिज़ाइन का सेंस है कि थ्रू आउट घर में एक लैंग्वेज होनी चाहिए स्टोरी, तो कुछ भी रैंडम एक वॉल को भी लेके आएँगे, यार ये मेरे को यहाँ पे डालना है। तो बट वो फिट इन नहीं होता, वो काफ़ी चीज़ें होती हैं, बैक एंड फोर्थ रिविजन्स भी होती है। हम जो अपने डिज़ाइन्स देते हैं फिर वो बाद में चेंज भी कर देते हैं कि नहीं यार यहाँ पे मेरे को अच्छा लगा, मैं यहाँ पे वॉल पे डालूँगा। तो वो काफ़ी चीज़ें होती हैं, कुछ लोग अच्छे क्लाइंट्स भी हैं जो मतलब वो पूरी रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं डिज़ाइन को, अवर दे ट्रस्ट अस कि जो भी करेंगे अच्छा करेंगे, तो उससे भी हेल्प हमें।
Soumya, how do you think we make a space luxury, minimalist, and aesthetic?
Luxury, minimalist, and aesthetic could mean different things for different people. So I feel what it is important is to make a space that is something that you resonate with, that kind of talks about your style, talks about your emotion, talks about, like, for somebody, aesthetic would be uh, something that just is like, left and right are equal, or something that is they've seen something and they want to implement the same thing in the space. But for somebody else, aesthetic would be there, or luxury could be whatever. When they've traveled around the world, or when they've traveled around certain areas, they've collected and curated something. So for me, we let that, like how Sudhir mentioned, we let the client give us a sense of brief ki what is it that means for them, right? Like in terms of aesthetic and luxury, we kind of draw from their emotion and plug that into the space. It is not my personality that I or his personality that we try to rub it off in a project. It is taking away from the client and then kind of implementing and making sure that the project sits well for them, especially in residential. I feel that holds a lot of importance.
Sudhir, how do you think your profession has shaped you as a person?
As a person, we have like for me, sure. There are so many changes in me. Like I मतलब हर एक दिन कुछ नया लर्निंग है, बट लाइक ओवरऑल मतलब
मतलब आपको क्या लगता है कि एज ए ह्यूमन बीइंग, क्योंकि आप इतने लोगों के साथ डील कर रहे हैं, आप किसी का घर बना रहे हैं, इट्स अ लॉट ऑफ इमोशन इट नीड्स, सो हाउ दैट हैज चेंज्ड यू, और आप कैसे, हाउ डू यू थिंक दिस हैज शेप्ड यू?
एक्चुअली हमारे पास हर तरह के क्लाइंट है। लाइक दे आर लाइक कोई बिजनेसमैन, इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट है, कोई लाइक जो प्रोफेशनल्स है, सम गवर्नमेंट ऑफिसर्स। सो वी आर लाइक कि मतलब सबके एक इमोशंस अलग है, सबसे कुछ नया सीखने को मिलता है। तो हम सबसे कुछ मतलब हर टाइम एज अ बिजनेस भी सीखते हैं कि हम कैसे ग्रो करें, लोग हमें मतलब हेल्प भी करते हैं, और मतलब अपनी एक पर्सनल आइडेंटिटी भी चेंज हो रही है। हमारी जो पहले एक इमेज थी और जितनी जल्दी लोग हमें मिल लाइक काफ़ी टाइम मेरे साथ हो भी चुका है, साइट पे हम जाते हैं तो लोग कहते हैं कि आप आर्किटेक्ट हो, आपके सीनियर तो आए नहीं है। तो हम बोलते हैं कि नहीं, मैं ही आर्किटेक्ट है, हम ही सीनियर है, हम प्रिंसिपल आर्किटेक्ट है यहाँ पे। तो लोगों को डाउट भी होता है कि इतनी कम एज में आप लोगों ने आप तो इतने यंग हो, आप कैसे, मैं आप पे कैसे ट्रस्ट करूँ? मेरे इतनी बड़ी इन्वेस्टमेंट है घर पे, इतने बड़े इमोशन जुड़े हुए हैं, मैं आपको कैसे, मेरी फैमिली ट्रस्ट नहीं करेगी, मेरे बच्चे ट्रस्ट नहीं करेंगे, लोग बोलते हैं। बट वो विद टाइम जब लोग थोड़ा-सा टाइम स्पेंड करते हैं, लाइक कंफर्टेबल होते हैं, वो हमको जज भी करते हैं कि कितनी नॉलेज है, कितना आइडिया है इनको, कितनी चीज़, कितना सब कुछ इनको पता है, नहीं पता है। तो हर तरह से ट्रस्ट करते हैं, तो हमारे चांसेस है कि हमें 80-90% प्रोजेक्ट मिल जाते हैं जब वंस मतलब क्लाइंट कोई भी हमसे मिलने आता है। एंड एज अ पर्सनल काफ़ी चीज़ें मेरे में भी मतलब चेंजेस हो गए हैं, लाइक लाइफस्टाइल, अपग्रेडेशन, एक्सपोजर, काफ़ी चीज़ नई सुनने को मिलती है। एज अ ग्रो कैसे करें, हम क्लाइंट से भी सीखते हैं कि हम कैसे आगे बढ़े, ग्रो करते हैं। तो मतलब हर दिन कुछ नया
It's an
है।
ever evolving field, right? And especially with residential, there's so many technologies, so many new materials that are coming in. So अगर somebody is getting exposure from elsewhere, तो अपने घर पे लगाएगा तो हमारे को बताएगा ना कि naturally, you kind of, why don't you use this kind of a system? It will work better. So that is something. So yeah, every day there is exposure.
कुछ अच्छा भी होता है, कुछ दोनों के पॉजिटिव
Absolutely, I think.
नेगेटिव।
But my point is कि as a youngster, I think as a young firm, you people have been doing very well. The market is so saturated. There's so many people out there on Pinterest and Instagram. हर दिन सबकी social media strategy से लोग post कर रहे हैं. Every small detailings have been posted. So surviving in that market and being there and being consistent is one part which you people have proven. और जैसा सुबीर ने अभी मेंशन किया कि इट्स डिफिकल्ट, यंग बीइंग यंग पीपल डोंट बिलीव यू आल्सो वेरी इजीली, दे वुड थिंक कि इनको क्या है, मतलब बिकॉज आई वाज इन अनदर पॉडकास्ट विद अनदर आर्किटेक्ट एंड दे मेंशन दैट इट वाज सो डिफिकल्ट फॉर अस, I mean for constant 2 years we didn't get projects just because we were young. We were well, we were doing well, but people just didn't believe because they thought we're not practically and technically sounded. So how do you think this, this is a problem for younger
It
farmers?
is, but I feel like there social media comes to your leverage because when people see you've the skill of the projects that you're doing, often you're also putting out some educational content. They look at certain finished projects. So automatically there is this trust factor. It is your portfolio which is made very digital and very accessible to people. Like you search for SSDA, then somebody's going to look it up on Instagram. So it is it's like whatever they are thinking, they're like, okay, I like their aesthetic, but jante hai, nahi jante, so automatically they're like, okay, there's so many followers, they're doing so many projects, so they must be doing something right. So I can jump in the well with these guys. So kuch na kuch, something good is going to turn out of this. So it comes to advantage for sure.
स्केल के हम प्रोजेक्ट करते हैं उसको भी हमें हेल्प मिल जाती है. लोग ट्रस्ट करते हैं कि यार इतने बड़े प्रोजेक्ट कर रहे हैं, इतनी इन्वेस्टमेंट है लोगों की, तो लोग ट्रस्ट करते हैं, तो लोग हमें रिकमेंडेशन भी काफ़ी मिल जाती है. फिर इजी किसी न किसी नेटवर्क से कहीं ना कहीं लोग कनेक्ट हो जाते हैं हमारे.
उससे क्या आप एडवांटेज बोल रहे हैं सोशल मीडिया का, तो नाउ आई विल आस्क व्हाट डू यू थिंक इज द डिसएडवांटेज ऑफ सोशल मीडिया इन दिस?
So, like you mentioned, I think we were having a chat, and though like people are like, because it is saturated, and Sudhir also mentioned that people they'll sit over dinner for night and then be like, "Acha, ye ball achhi lag rahi hai. Cut, copy, paste, put it into my project." So they start feeling like they are the designers. They start feeling, okay, we know the best because one thing is aesthetic. How the whole story was, navigated. That there's a pause that's getting put to that. So I feel that is a very, very negative point. Ki as the architects, as somebody who's doing the interior design for the space, now there's a language that you're following up, which there's a story that you're unfolding with every space that is there in the house. That gets broken because the client, yeah, I understand, okay, you're the one who's spending the money. I understand it is your house. There's only a limit till, as a designer, you can push the client. Ultimately, they have to take a call. And because of social media, because of this thing that is constantly popping up on your feed, people want to cut, copy, paste the same thing into their house. So, which is a negative. Often, there are also certain details, like somebody gives them a random, say, curtain track detail. Okay. And we are of the opinion, okay, but this particular curtain track is going to work very well for you. We worked with this particular brand, sab acha hai. Just because some random influencer has mentioned that this curtain track is nice, so the client will be like, no, but this person has said this is nice, so this must be nice because they're only putting out educational content. So certain things, like sometimes these things kind of backfire, I feel.
All right. Or 5 materials you think are luxury?
Veneer, Italian marble, chandeliers, rugs, and wall panelings.
Wonderful. 5 materials you think make a home a home?
I feel a home of home. I feel like textiles really, really work to add that softness. I'm starting from the last point. I should have started that. I should have put that in the end. But so home, like again, like I'll come back to the whole design aspect. How you design the home, where you're putting what, definitely matters. It's just that for somebody, a double height entrance foyer could be home. But for other people, maybe just a little cozy 15 by 12 room where everybody can cuddle up and sit together could feel like a home. So spatial planning, I feel, plays a very, very important role. There should be light in the house, like natural light, any natural light, because it just makes you kind of work, spend more time. Otherwise, you're just trying to.
And it's livable.
Exactly, yeah. Third, I feel the spaces should be interactive. Like it shouldn't be like, yeah, you giving, like that is something at least I tell my clients, is that don't give bedrooms so big that is almost big as your formal living area. The Bible, give reasons to people to step out of the bedroom and spend time together, because that is what you're creating. Like the family needs to spend time together. And if you're giving everybody such massive spaces, even luxury houses, I'm like, kuch bahar nikalne ka reason to do usko aap. Then I feel in terms of getting the people, no, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's stuff.
Sudhir, how much time do you take to understand that now I can work with this person? ये अब मेरा 3D mood board, material board, BOQ, everything is ready. और अब मैं इनको onboard करके we can start working.
I can answer this question in 2 parts. Like ये mood board 3D डिजाइनिंग पार्ट ये सेकंड फेज में आता है. इनिशियली फर्स्ट फेज में हम क्लाइंट को जब ऑन बोर्ड करते हैं, क्लाइंट मिलते हैं, लाइक कोई न्यू क्वेरी है, हमें कुछ है, तो उससे पहले हम क्लाइंट का माइंडसेट, लाइक उसका रिस्पेक्ट टूवर्ड्स अस क्या है, क्या डिज़ाइन को कितना वो रिस्पेक्ट करेगा, आगे ट्रस्ट करेगा कि कल को ऐसा ना हो कि बहुत मतलब कुछ क्लाइंट्स बहुत परेशान करने वाले भी होते हैं, ऐसे उस टाइप का ना हो। तो वो हम जनरली थोड़ा सा फिगर आउट कर लेते हैं कि इस टाइप के क्लाइंट है कि वो रिस्पेक्ट करता है, ट्रस्ट करता है, कितना करेगा हमको या कितना इन्वॉल्व होगा, उससे भी बहुत वो भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है हमारे लिए। अदरवाइज उस सब चीज़ें जब ठीक होती है, हमें मतलब एक थोड़ा सा एक आइडिया हो जाता है कि जब मिलते हैं एज अ ह्यूमन पार्ट, तो जब मिलते हैं कि यार इसके साथ कम काम करने में मज़ा आएगा, हम इसको ऑन बोर्ड कर सकते हैं। ऑन बोर्ड करने के बाद फिर लाइक यूजली जो हमें 1 डेढ़ 2 महीने का वो होता है, वो डिपेंड करता है प्रोजेक्ट के स्केल पे क्या है कि मूड बोर्ड, 3Ds, प्लान्स, लेआउट, एवरीथिंग। कंस्ट्रक्शन शुरू करने से पहले हमें मतलब 1.5 से 2 महीने का टाइम चाहिए होता है, जिसमें कि क्लाइंट की इन्वॉल्वमेंट अगर कम होगी तो।
um, do you ever give option to your client कि आप मटेरियल चूज करके हमें बताइए कि आपको कैसा घर चाहिए?
वो होता है, वो डिपेंड करता है सिचुएशन पे। कुछ क्लाइंट्स होते हैं तो वहाँ पे वो काफ़ी रिजिड होते हैं, यार मेरे को जैसे कुछ क्लाइंट्स इनिशियली आते ब्रीफ करते हैं, वो कहते हैं नहीं मेरे को यार ये वाला स्टोन लगाना है जो वहाँ पे लगा हुआ था या कहीं पे देखा हुआ था। तो वो बड़ा ज़रूरी होता है हमारे लिए कि हम मतलब उस केस में फिर हमें क्लाइंट के हिसाब से ही कुछ चलना होता है। बट वो म्यूचुअली होता है हमारे, मतलब मोस्टली आजकल क्लाइंट्स अब विद टाइम उनको मतलब चीज़ें ट्रस्ट करते हैं, जैसे हम बोलते हैं फिर वो हो जाता है। बट दोनों तरफ से वी आर इक्वली।
I think more than the material, the budget plays a very important role, because when they are doing the 3Ds and when the 3D is frozen, what happens is कि उनको look पता है कि this build, like my house is going to look or my store is going to look in a certain fashion. Now it is on us, how can we achieve that thing? So typically when we put the mood board, हम कोशिश करके we, like for example there's a gray something, so we'll give options of gray stone, इसका ये pricing आएगा, इसका ये pricing आएगा, इस style का this look can be achieved in this thing, but naturally there'll be a change in durability, there'll be an effect on the building ka cooling and heating. So we kind of make them aware about the product ka utility and versatility.
So I mean, I know that you're doing 12 to 15,000 square feet homes right now, but one day you get a client who says, I want to build this 150 square feet home. How will you build that?
So we were very fortunate कि when we started out, हमारा पहला project turned out to be some 12,000, 15,000, and that somehow became a niche. Next 7, 8, 10 projects that we did, they were all of that scale. So whether or not we wanted, automatically turned, it was a niche that we had carved out for ourselves. However, as we are at heart, we are artists only, right? Like if there's an interesting project, if there's an interesting client, if there is something which is atypical that pops up, we would love to pick on that project. Usko kaise karna hai? I feel like we appreciate design challenges. I feel like in a bigger space na, you get all kinds of freedom. उसमें होता है अच्छा उसको और rich कैसे दिखाना है या फिर उसको और raw कैसे दिखाना है. In a small space, it actually makes you exercise your brain, which I feel is more interesting.
Yes, I think smaller spaces brings more
More challenge.
creativity.
Yeah, that's true. And also all the creativity together, because in larger
Absolutely.
in the 30 feet of wall, you're trying to say, idhar stone karo, idhar ye detailing dalo. In a small space, you can see all your elements together, which I think is a beautiful sight.
Wonderful. Anything you would like to add to this?
In fact, we have done a couple of projects now in small scale.
Yeah, we've done. Yeah. But now revisiting in the future also, if there's something that pops up, I think it'd be wonderful to pick on.
One thing you would like to speak of SSDA.
One thing we'd like to speak of SSDA. In what context?
How do you represent SSDA as an architectural firm? What's the goal of SSDA as a whole?
So recently, I was there at an event where there was an architect from the United States. He had given a presentation. And in that presentation, he mentioned, so he was just mentioning about how he got a typical project, one of the projects. So one day, he's like, one fine day, I get a call from the Prince of Saudi Arabia. And this prince called me up and he's like, listen, I want to make the most wonderful project. And I want to make the most wonderful hospitality project. And for this, you just have to come down to Saudi Arabia and you figure out where you want to make this. So
freedom you want.
So yeah. So this architect, he flew down to Saudi Arabia from the United States. For 7 days in the desert, they roamed around to find the site. These guys, they found like this big rock formation. And instead of doing architecture of addition, they did architecture of subtraction. And then they designed a beautiful hotel.
Nice.
So what my ideal goal would be to have that kind of freedom where I'm actually choosing my site, converting my vision 100% as per what I want to convert it into, and more people can experience that. That is definitely one. Another thing is that whenever we travel, especially abroad, there are all these public areas where people were like, oh, I want to chill by the fountain, or I want to be in that space. And it is an architecture of nothingness, right? You don't have to go and spend money, you just have to sit there, enjoy the space, enjoy the ambience. They don't have such places in India. I would love to create these kind of landmarks in the country where everybody could enjoy. It is not for the uber luxury or people who can spend, it is for everybody. So architecture that works for everyone, I think that would be an ideal goal for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Thanks, Saumya. Thank you, Sudhir.